Welcome again to Messianic Expectations in Acts by Susan Hares. This is a 12-part series that looks at the Messianic expectations behind Acts as a prelude to Thessalonians 1 and 2. Now, the first 6 parts of this 12-part series look at Old Testament Messianic scriptures that would have influenced the people in the first century. Parts 7 and 8 look at 2 books that were intertestamental books that influenced the people of the time for their expectation about the Messiah, for the expectations about the fact the Messiah was imminent, that his arrival was imminent. Then I have 4 parts that look at people at the time of the first century and their expectations, the Samaritans, the Pharisees, the Essenes, and then Philo of Alexandria, who did not write expectations, but lived in Alexandria, which was a hotbed of expectations for the Messiah. And we'll discuss why he was an apologist rather than speaking of a messianic expectations. Well, let's go to the last of the Old Testament passages. We're going to look in 3 passages in Isaiah. Now, Isaiah could have many passages, but at this point, I have just picked 3. These 3 you may recognize from passages at Christmas time that you've listened to, or you may just have read these passages. But let's look again at these passages in Greek and in English. Now let's start with Isaiah 9:7. There will be no end to the increase of his government of peace on the throne of David or his kingdom, to establish it, uphold it with justice and righteousness, for the zeal of the Lord of hosts. Now notice, Megalon he arcane uto, the greatness of his kingdom and his peace. There will be horon, no end. Uk iston horon, upon the throne of David, his. Katokleosatai uton, and he will establish it and uphold it. Antalabesatai utos. Notice you have the strong phrase where you're getting the Greek to actually put the increase first, the kingdom of David first, before the verbs. And the verbs are compound. And then you have a series of prepositional phrase, in righteousness or with righteousness, in justice, krematatan uto, nun and eston iona, okay, the forever time. And the zeal of the Lord, he zotos kuyu sabatetai poeste uta, and the Lord to do this, you probably recognize from much of your studies in Greek. Now let's look at Isaiah 11:1-2. Then a shoot will spring forth from the stem of Jesse, that is, a descendant, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit. Again, the same sort of plant to seed to human being. Now look at the sevenfold Spirit. The Spirit of the Lord, again, that's Yahweh in Hebrew, rests upon him. Wisdom and understanding, counsel and strength, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. Now, notice these are parallel statements. When you see the parallel statements, you see the sevenfold Spirit, the pairing of the wisdom and the understanding, which is inward, the pairing of the outward counsel to others and strength, and the pairing of the knowledge of the fear. So inward, outward, and upward to God, this passage has. Look to see in Paul's writing in Thessalonians and Acts that he does some of the same thing. Now, let's go to verses 3 and 5 in chapter 11. It says, "And he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge what his eyes see, nor make a decision what his ears hear, but with righteousness he will judge the poor." In a world where getting to the ruler and saying a word could sway justice, the fact that a ruler who delights in the fear of the Lord, again, that's Yahweh, would be able to discern all of that clearly, not just by what his eyes see or ears see, but with righteousness and with fairness for the afflicted. He will strike the word with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of the lips he will say the wicked. Remember that you will see this also in Revelations, and righteousness will be about his loins, and faithfulness a belt about his waist. Now these sort of things say the king is different. He is even more just and faithful than David. Now, that's a dramatic thing inside of the world of the oligarchies of Rome, where money was everything. Justice was subverted for money or bribed. Now in Isaiah 60, we have several things that you may hear. The Lord will rise upon you and his glory will appear. Nations will come to your light and kings to your rising. Again, that's the sort of psalm of a Messianic king, of a king that's coming. And then you start to hear that the exile will be reversed, that all the destroyer will come home, that the sons will come from afar and your daughters will be carried. If you were a Jew in the diaspora, you would want to hear this. You would want to hear you had a homeland. You would want to see that the wealth came with you, that the camels came to bring lots of things, and they bring gold. It goes on, saying, "Surely the coastlands will wait for me, and the ships will come first, and silver and gold." This is a return from Babylon didn't have this. The second temple did not match these expectations. It is a hope that the Israelites of the return, as the people did from Egypt, with wealth and money, and that the nations will minister or they will lose by perishing, utter ruin. This is Israel coming to the top of the ladder of nations instead of Rome. Now let's go on with a few more statements. You will suckle the milk of nations and suck the breast of kings. And what that really is they will be your nursemaids instead of you serving them. And you will know that I, Yahweh, am your Savior and the Redeemer. Again, you're curing wealth. Instead of bronze, I bring you gold. Instead of iron, silver. Instead of wood, bronze. Instead of stones, iron. The smallest one will become a clan, and the mighty one will become a nation. I, the Lord, will hasten it. This had to be tremendously good news to the diaspora. No wonder they read this and hoped. Even today, as Christians, read this and hope that God will see our right. Well, thank you for listening to the last. I'm sure we could go into many more verses in Isaiah, but we will turn next to the intertestamental expectations in the Psalm of Solomon. Thank you again, and I look forward to chatting with you again in the next session.